Welcome back to the Vibe Shift Podcast. As we conclude this week's conversation, I'd like to begin by revisiting the core problem we've been exploring. Not overwhelm, not burnout, not stress, although all of those certainly can be connected. The core problem was this: I never feel finished. For many people, especially high-achieving professionals and leaders, this feeling has become so normal that they barely notice it anymore. There's always another email, another project, another responsibility, another problem to solve, another decision to make, another demand competing for attention. And because there is always more to do, many people live with the subtle belief that peace is waiting somewhere in the future. After the next deadline, after the next achievement, after the next promotion, after the next financial milestone, after the next problem is solved, the mind keeps saying, then I'll relax, then I'll breathe, then I'll finally feel caught up. But for many people, that moment never arrives. What we've discovered this week. On Monday, we explored something important. The mind is naturally wired to focus on what remains unfinished. It's constantly scanning for what still requires attention. That ability helped human beings survive, but in modern life, it often creates a very different experience. The brain becomes extraordinarily good at seeing what remains undone and remarkably poor at recognizing what has already been accomplished. As a result, accomplishments become invisible. Progress becomes invisible. Growth becomes invisible. The unfinished receives all of the attention, and eventually we begin to believe that unfinished is who we are. Then on Wednesday, we explored the emotional consequence of that pattern. The feeling of always being behind. Not because we are actually behind, but because the mind keeps moving the finish line. Every accomplishment becomes normal. Every success becomes expected. Every milestone quickly fades into the background. And almost immediately the question becomes, what's next? No wonder so many successful people struggle to feel satisfied. They rarely pause long enough to acknowledge how far they've already come. The assumption nobody questions. There is an assumption hidden beneath all of this, and an assumption that most people never stop to examine. The assumption is this: life is supposed to reach a state of completion. Think of how often we tell ourselves stories like, once I get through this, once things settle down, once I finish these projects, once everything is handled. And yet when we arrive at those moments, something interesting happens. Life keeps going. New opportunities emerge. New challenges appear. New responsibilities arrive. New dreams begin calling. The finish line moves once again. Perhaps the problem is not that we haven't reached completion. Perhaps the problem is that we've been expecting life to become something it never was designed to become. Life is not a project. Many people unknowingly begin treating life like a project, something to organize, optimize, manage, complete. But life is not a project. Life is a process, a living, breathing, evolving experience. A project has an end. A process unfolds. A project gets completed. A process continues deepening. The moment we forget this distinction, we begin measuring ourselves against impossible standards. We expect ourselves to finish what cannot be finished, and then we criticize ourselves for failing to do so. The river analogy. Imagine standing beside a river and becoming frustrated because it never arrives, because it never finishes, because it keeps flowing. The frustration would seem strange. The river isn't broken. The river is doing exactly what rivers do. They move, they change, they flow. Human life may be much the same. There will always be another lesson, another challenge, another season, another opportunity to grow, another opportunity to serve, another opportunity to love. Life isn't failing because it continues unfolding. Life is expressing its nature. and perhaps we suffer when we demand that it stops unfolding. A different relationship with completion. What if completion isn't something you achieve? What if completion is something you practice? Not permanent completion, momentary completion. Completion of this conversation, completion of this task, completion of this day, completion of this season, completion of this chapter. You don't need to complete your entire life to experience completion. You simply need to recognize what has been completed before rushing toward what comes next. That small shift changes everything, because now peace is not dependent upon finishing everything. Peace becomes available in the middle of life. The freedom of enough. This brings us to perhaps the deepest insight of this week. Enoughness is not found at the end of accomplishment. Enoughness is found in your relationship with the present moment. The person who cannot feel enough now will not feel enough later. The person who cannot recognize progress now will struggle to recognize it after the next achievement. The person who believes peace exists only at the finish line will spend a lifetime chasing horizons. But the moment we stop demanding that life become complete, something softens. The pressure eases, the striving relaxes, the constant feeling of being behind begins losing its grip, and we discover something surprising. Life can be deeply meaningful without being finished. Closing reflection. As you move into this coming week, I invite you to consider a simple possibility. Maybe you're not behind. Maybe you're not unfinished. Maybe you are simply living. Maybe life was never asking you to complete it. Maybe life was asking you to participate in it, to learn, to grow, to contribute, to love, to experience, to become. Not someday, but now. Because the truth is that there will always be more to do, but there will never be another moment exactly like this one. And perhaps the deepest wisdom is learning how to fully inhabit this moment while life remains beautifully unfinished. Until next time, keep shifting, keep growing, and keep remembering, you are not a project to complete. You are a life unfolding, and that is enough. The conversation continues on the Vibrational Stage podcast. This week on the Vibrational Stage, this week we've explored awareness behind never feeling finished. On the Vibrational Stage podcast, we explore how to embody a different way of living. We dive deeper into why the nervous system becomes conditioned to pressure and urgency, the hidden rewards of staying busy, why many high achievers struggle to rest, how to create healthy experiences of completion throughout the day, practices that recognize progress before moving on to the next task, building a sustainable relationship with achievement and success, and moving from chronic striving to intentional living. The difference between the two shows. The Vibe Shift podcast explores awareness and understanding. The Vibrational Stage podcast explores application and transformation. Join us as we take this week's conversation from insight into lived experience. You can follow the link in the show notes, and I'll meet you there.